Hey everyone, Ariel Adams here with the Superlative Podcast. My guest today is Matthieu Haverlan. He's the Managing Director of Ulysse Nardin. Matthieu, welcome.
Thank you, Ariel, for having me.
So just to let everyone sort of understand, in the instance of Ulysse Nardin, Managing Director is essentially the person in charge. You effectively run the Ulysse Nardin watch company right now, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, I am. I've been with the brand about almost 8 years now, and initially was, managing sales and distribution, and I basically took the helm of the company beginning of this year, 2024.
It's funny because there's, very little, we'll call them universal terminology in this industry. And even at brands, there's no one specific title for the person in charge. It's not always CEO. It's not always this or that. It's a whole myriad of different things. And that leads me sort of in the first question. Why do you think the watch industry from company to company are run so differently? We're going to talk a lot about management, and you're someone who studied management. Why is it in this space, and maybe it's like this in every industry, but every watch brand, even though they make kind of the same thing, they're all run so differently. Why is that?
That's a difficult question to answer. At least I'll talk to you about what I know, and probably I think couple of things. I think I work in for groups, right? So I've worked for Sowind Group, for the Richemont Group. And also even, it's a Kering group that hired me for the job at UN initially. So belonging to a group and being independent makes you manage the company, I believe, differently. It's a different frame. I mean, obviously, here for UN and also for GP, it's also our business. It's our companies because we acquired those companies from the Kering group. So it's even more entrepreneurial. But I think probably the biggest difference is, at least for what I feel being independent, is that we see much more longer term.
Right.
And that's the pressure somehow, even though, business is not every day easy, and managing companies is not easy. But I would say that, it's not the pressure on the short term. It's almost no longer here.
So when you say short term, let's be more specific. How short term?
So look, I mean, I've been basically working for groups for more than a decade, and short term means that you've got a monthly rhythm where basically you've got your target that you need to achieve. Obviously, you're going to have a quarterly also review with finance. You're going to have a half-year review. You've got forecast 1, forecast 2, landing, and I think it goes up to a point where it's sometimes silly for the company itself, because I remember when I was at Richemont, for instance, we had to land on the budget, whatever the cost anyway. So for instance, if we had, a marketing budget to spend or a CapEx budget to spend, we just had to land on the number, which is absolutely silly, because the way we do it now is, if a budget is not spent, it's fine. It's a saving and we better spend it differently. So it's not for granted, right? So I think the sense of responsibility when you belong to a group or when you work for something which is, very much independent and the purpose is going to be different, it is going to be different too. So I think it's one thing also on the product development. So for instance, I think the length of developing product, I think was pretty much short term before, meaning that it was probably 2 to 3 years ahead. Now we are basically planning more like 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
So for me, for the last couple of years, it's new to think about what we're going to develop in 7 years down the line. But we have to, because I think the cornerstone of everything is the fact that what matters the most is a brand equity, and there is no agenda. There is no, short-term agenda. There is not a year agenda. We want to do the best for the brand. And we have the time, because that time is basically almost unlimited to do it right. So we just focus very much more on the brand equity. And therefore, when you focus on the brand equity, the perspective are much more longer term, I believe.
Thank you for that information. It's incredibly insightful. I feel like we may have gotten a little ahead of ourselves because I think some of the audience needs some context, not only on the specific topic, but the history of how Ulysse Nardin got to this point, because what you're saying is so interesting. I want to, again, discuss some background here. So first of all, I think it's important to say that Ulysse Nardin right now is effectively independently run. It's a joint between Gerard Perregaux and Ulysse Nardin. But that's sort of one company which is running itself, and you are part of that team along with others, including Patrick Pernot, who's been on the show as well. But it wasn't always that way. Prior to that, it was owned by the Kering Group, and prior to that, it was independent, owned by a few people. The first that I knew was Mr. Rolf Schneider, who I believe in the early 1980s purchased this classic name, Ulysse Nardin, which was this company that made, ship chronometer clocks and interesting stuff like that. It was, in a sense, a real military supplier as well. That's why the Marine chronometer wristwatch was such a big deal because of that history. There's a great museum in Le Locle, which you can learn more about that. So Mr. Schneider purchased this ailing brand at sort of the tail end of the quartz crisis, and he made it really special. He injected a bunch of things into Ulysse Nardin, like crazy high-end watches, art watches. He was the one that was responsible for the Freak, the work with Ludwig Oschlin, the various astronomical watches they did, I think, going back to the 80s and 90s. He really made the brand fun and spirited and cool and crazy and weird. He passed away, and I believe the company, along with his wife, who had owned some ownership of it, decided to sell to a group. I guess, normal thing. He was no longer there. I don't think that she was that involved in the company. Sells to Kering Group, and Kering Group is a group that's among the smaller, but definitely a major player in the luxury space. Their most notable asset is Gucci. And they acquired, Sowind Group, which, and Ulysse Nardin. And then for a lot of reasons I don't even know we need to get into, Kering decided they didn't really want to be so much in this watch industry space. And they made it known that they wanted to sell, but rather than a sort of more standard buyer, there was an employee buyout, which led to the position we're in right now. Matthieu, am I missing any material facts? How would you correct, or what would you add to what I said?
No, absolutely. I think the way maybe I will supplement is, I believe UN has always been a collective adventure. Because, when you dig into the 5 generation of Nardin that, first founded and developed UN, it was always, Nardin, so Ulysse Nardin at the beginning, then Paul David Nardin, his son. But there was always, surrounded by highly talented individuals that, they wouldn't have done it, like having the leadership in chronometry for over a century. Is because Paul David Nardin was surrounded by some of the best talented individuals. Then, if you think about the Rolf Schneider period, it was Rolf, but it was also Ludwig Oschling, the mastermind behind the Freak and behind some of our crazy complications, but also Pierre Gigax, the engineer behind the silicon. Yeah. And same today in a way. It's not just me. It's not just Patrick. It's a collective of employees that basically own the business. So the exception during which we've not been UN independent was from 2014 to 2022, which was a Kering era. Having said that, I believe that we still stay pretty much autonomous, I would say, within a large luxury conglomerate. So, but I think you summed that up pretty well.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting situation. I think one of the natural questions is, at the time when Kering was looking to sell, What was it about the status of the company, the potential future, the opportunity, which made yourself and others like Patrick interested in acquiring it themselves? What did you feel that Kering was not doing well and just didn't know about? I mean, I think it was a wonderful thing. I think it was a brave thing and it was an exciting thing. But talk about some of the emotions at the time and some of the things that you and the team was talking about.
So I think so. It's not the first time that Kering are doing it. It's actually the second time.
Okay.
They did it with a distribution company, French one called La Redoute. Mm-hmm. And they also decided to sell the company to some of the team's employees. So UNNGP was the second time that they've done that. I think that they realized that, Kering is about distribution.
Right.
And UNNGP are about manufacturing. So not the different model. They sell directly to the consumer. We sell through wholesale, and we produce. When Kering is going to be outsourcing a lot of things, for the product. So not at all. I would say the same business model. And eventually, I think they realized obviously that probably they were not on the sales and financial trajectory they had anticipated initially, and they came to the conclusion that probably the best chance for those two companies to succeed, it's to have a different setup. So obviously, they approached us and said, the management buyout was considered to be one of the options. It was not the only one. So obviously we were, I guess competing with groups, with private individuals, with private equity. But we fought for that project because we obviously, it was a project dear to us, and we wanted to keep developing those brands and being the co-owners of the brands. And eventually, I believe we managed to convince them because they were convinced that the best chance of success for those two brands going forward was to be fully independent and to have that management buyout, scheme.
That's oddly, nice of them, right? Usually these groups are seen as pretty cold, and if something isn't making them money, well, then they don't really care what happens to it. What is it about the culture there, or maybe it's the luxury space in general, where they decide we don't know what to do with this, but we hope that somebody else does, as opposed to, liquidating it and gutting it?
Yeah, I think the spirit, and I've worked for the Sowind Group and Richemont before. The difference with Kering is the entrepreneurial mindset is very strong, and it's not just nice words; it's a reality, I think, within the company. So you feel that when when we were presenting to the board, the business plan and the development plan of the brand, always I would say on the partner side. So it means that they were trying to help, to understand, and to see from their perspective what they could bring to the table, and eventually they gave us the means to succeed, because obviously part of the exit was to they want us to succeed. They wanted us to succeed, and therefore they said, okay, what are the means? What do you need? A couple of years down the line to succeed. And inventory was the inventory in the point of sale was quite significant, and we had to deal with it. So basically, they gave us, the means, financially means to buy back, to close a lot of the distribution, the non-qualitative retailers, and to basically buy that inventory. So we managed to, I'm talking about, quite a few millions of Swiss francs or euro that have been spent, but putting us really in a position to succeed, being independent.
Nice. And I guess it sounds through your conversation that maybe not all groups would be the same way.
True, but it means that, for instance, I think the retail partners that we kept. So we used to have 700 plus point of sale. Now we have like about 280. Mm-hmm. We are very. They remember that, and still today, obviously not to the same extent, but I'm obsessed by stock rotation, age in stock. and I want the retailer in the end, to have a good return on the investment. So it's really discussion that we had, for already, quite some years and still having today. So I think they feel that, and they know that we are helping them when it's needed. And even, for a consumer, it's good for the consumer to realize that in a shop, there is a product that has not been lying down, for years, not being serviced and so on. So, but it's true that based on what I hear, there is very few brands that are especially currently doing it.
Yeah, that's actually, to me, kind of incredible story about how Kering let go of something and not only let go of it, but actually gave it resources in order to succeed. Almost like, okay, little bird, you're leaving the nest now. We want you to be able to fly on your own. That's nice, and I don't think a lot of other groups would do that. You mentioned that they helped you, the term, I guess, is, clean up the market. There was a lot of unsold inventory out there, which can hurt a brand, especially when you're relaunching and you're changing your image. And you sort of, you clear it aside and things like that. And again, that's an incredible thing because that can be very damaging. It also sounds, I'd love your thoughts here, that you are going to continue as a wholesale brand, produce watches where you sell to third-party retailers, and that is going to be the model. Is that going to be the model? Is it going to be a hybrid? Is it going to be mostly wholesale? What is your personal taste? What is it that you want to be the primary way that Ulysse Nardin sells watches?
So I think it's a twofold answer. One is what I believe, and two, it's also being realistic.
Okay.
So first of all, I do believe in wholesale, and for me, it's a matter of also how many watches you produce, at what price point, and what is the desirability around the brand, the awareness and the desirability. So let's say if you do produce a lot of volume, lower hand, and you've got a not so good desirability and awareness, obviously you need massively the wholesale network. On the opposite side, if you are high hand, low volume, very high desirability, you have a possibility, to kind of, sell direct. So to some extreme, and then I'll talk about UN. You're gonna have, maybe the APs of this world or the Richard Mille with, obviously it's not the same volume, but very high desirability. They really build the brand over years to some extreme, and then they are able to push, the directly operated model to some extreme, but which basically is following up, what fashion and other industries are doing. On the other hand, obviously, a brand, like Tissot or Longines, they need massively wholesale to sell, and then in between you're gonna have, and it's a brand that I know well because I've been working for Jaeger LeCoultre for 6 years, and I absolutely love that brand. But you see that they are reaching the limit of the directly operated model because they need to sell 60,000-70,000 watches a year. And desirability is okay, but value retention, is also not so great. And therefore, there is that ratio to direct to consumer wholesale that they need to find the sweet spot. For UN, I strongly believe in the wholesale network, in the wholesale distribution, obviously the good ones. And that's why we've been cleaning massively the distribution. I believe that our primary job is to manufacture watches. And I believe the job, for the wholesale is basically to sell. Having said that, it's a joint responsibility. And this is what I've been saying, to our existing partners is you've got a joint responsibility to build the brand with us. Because if it's just about being transactional, you're not fully doing your job. Your job is to promote, your job is to educate. Your job is obviously, to respect the brand, the best way possible, and to have, a long-term relationship with us. So that's why I'm very pleased with our relationship, with the Vempe, the Watch US Switzerland, the Hourglass, the Booker, of this world, but also some very key independent retailers. Obviously, I'm thinking about the US because you've got also quite a few, and I'm strongly backing them up in their model. That's one. That's my belief. Two, realistic, because with what's happening on the market, with many brands basically going direct, it leaves space. And space, not necessarily space in the shop. Yes, it leaves space in the shop, but it leaves space because those retailers have been building, database of consumers over the years. And at some point, they need to sell something, right? So I believe with what's happening currently on the distribution, it's an opportunity for UN to reemphasize and to reinforce the wholesale model. Having said that, we've got a limited number of boutiques. We've got a few in China, which are necessary if you want to develop really domestically the market.
You mean when you say boutiques, you mean your own boutiques?
Our own boutiques, yeah. We've got about 20 boutiques, out of which 5 are directly operated. 4 are in China, and 1 is in Geneva, which is basically for me also a good point of sale to experiment things, with the consumer in terms of in terms of a lot of things. So I am a lot in a test and try model, and then if it's working, I'm scaling, and I'm leveraging my UN boutique in Geneva to test quite a few things. But apart from that, I'm a strong believer in the wholesale multi-brand distribution.
It's an important topic. I don't know if you noticed, this is quite coincidentally, the day that we're recording this is different than the day this will be first published. An article published that I wrote on aBlogtoWatch, and it's how will the silent war between watch brands and retailers unfold as the industry eyes America? And I discuss this interesting story, especially in America and other parts of the world, where there is a very real confrontational and combative relationship that has a lot of conflicts of interest between the third-party retailers who purchase wholesale and the brands who can't quite decide sometimes which direction they want to go. It does sound like you have a very healthy attitude towards wholesale, which is good. And my question for you, in addition to wanting your thoughts on this article after you read it, is what could change about the wholesale model, or third-party retailers for that matter, that would make it perfect for you? What would make it so that you would have no desire to have any of your own stores and you'd be completely happy just selling wholesale? What could change about them or the market to make that interesting for you?
Because for me it's a joint responsibility, to promote the brand, and we've got limited means, and I believe that we are not so much a marketing brand in a way. Like, there is a lot of things that we do, and we don't talk too much about it. But so having said that, for me but where we do have success today in wholesale is when the retailer are really first promoting UN and telling the story, but also opening up their portfolio of clients. So for instance, I'm going to be concrete. Today we've got more and more retailers that are spontaneously creating occasions to meet the UN teams. Even though it's a coffee in the shop, a one-to-one. So we've been, I call it, UN is a wholesale brand with a retail mindset. Wholesale because we sell through wholesale, but retail mindset because we need to have interaction with the final consumer, even though in the end, eventually the transaction goes through wholesale. So I think today I've got probably, I don't know what proportion, but I've got more and more retailers that are playing that game. I mean, not a game, but that are understanding that it's a B2B2C, right? As opposed to a B2B and a B2C. So in that case, I'm pretty happy because we have now many occasions, and I think the retailer, we gain their confidence. They are relaxed to do that because they know that we're not going to open, our boutiques around the corner. So I'm pretty pleased with that. I think they're not doing it with a lot of people because obviously they trust us on that aspect. And just to go back also to why I believe in wholesale is, I think if you choose the right wholesale multi-brand retailer, I believe they have a key role to play in fueling the passion for watchmaking for the younger generation. And that was my journey into watches. I was 15 years old. I was in Paris on Rue Madame. I was with my parents. I had a baseball cap. I had baggy jeans. And I kind of stopped in front of a shop window and I saw really amazing, actually it was vintage watches at that time. And I decided to enter, and obviously I was not, the typical consumer, as you can imagine. And I stayed in that shop for like an hour and a half. And the watchmaker and the sales man in store gave me a story of many brands, because I had the possibility to see, quite a few different products. And and therefore, I think for me, wholesale, multi-brand is a great place to basically fuel the passion for watchmaking, offering a variety of brands and products. I mean, that's my belief.
I'm just imagining how many people Paris has turned into watch lovers. I also had a very early experience with watches in Paris. And, we have to celebrate these places that turn people into addicts. I mean, I hate to use that language, but really, that's one of the amazing things is people like us have had that formative experience where we became someone who knew about watches to someone says, I am someone that defines myself as someone that loves watches. Paris is such a great city for that. I just thank you for sharing that story. I also agree that discovery is a huge part of it. And we're having this conversation earlier, and I think that one of the major differences between brand boutiques and independent third-party retailers is this idea of selling a service versus selling a product. You became, in that moment when you were younger, in that wonderful story, you became obsessed with the idea of watches. There wasn't one specific one there. You would have been happy to have any number of those watches, I'm sure. The service of going in there, that experience, speaking to those individuals, that's what was important to you. If it was just a brand boutique where you just saw some logo on the outside, you might have just walked right by. And I think that a lot of consumers, especially early on in their watch love, are buying that service. They're buying the experience of feeling positive about themselves, being excited about something. It's easier to do that in a multi-brand environment than in a totally branded environment where they're selling a product. And like you use the word desirability. Someone needs to already want that product before they go into the store and then go into the store and try to buy one. But most of the work has to be done before they ever enter. I'm sure there's very few situations where someone has gone to a brand boutique and been like, I've never heard about this stuff or this product category, but now I'm sold. Like it takes a lot more work than that. So I think it's very interesting to distinguish the two different experiences and services really that brand boutiques versus third-party retailers do. So you probably have thoughts on that.
No, and it's also because there is we are not talking about the elephant in the room, which is Rolex, and most of the point of sale with in which we are, there is Rolex, and therefore, I mean Rolex ensures traffic, right? So there is on one side, the job of the retailer to promote the brand and to promote, watchmaking in the area where they are. But obviously, when they do have Rolex, it facilitates traffic, and it creates even more opportunity at some point, to introduce, other brands, as opposed to if you do operate, standalone boutiques. I mean, you need to generate, traffic in the end and conversion also to have somehow a return on investment. The way I see typically our Geneva boutique is. And that's why I want to have a bit of directly, not too much, but a bit, like we have, for instance, today, it's an opportunity also to get to know very much in detail customers and to get insights for that, which is very useful then in regards of, for instance, product development or for the strategy of the company itself.
What types of things can you learn when watching a customer going into your store that you couldn't necessarily learn by working with a retailer or something like that? I think that's a very interesting point. Practically speaking, what are you actually observing?
What I believe is when a customer, is getting presented you and in a wholesale multi-brand, I don't know, maybe on average, they're going to have, half an hour or so, to talk about the brand, and then they will probably talk about another brand. When a customer come into our boutiques, for instance, in Geneva, they can stay, anywhere between sometimes 1 hour to 2 hours. So therefore, the quality and the variety of the topics that are discussed are much higher. And this is why actually, the first floor of the boutique in Geneva is kind of my second office, because I like to be there when I can once a week to also engage with customers directly. So to me personally, it's an opportunity to engage with even more people directly and to test things, to ask questions. I generally like asking a lot of questions about, not to show that we are having doubt about what we do, but to ask just a feedback. And from the feedback I got and that the team is getting in the boutique, we are definitely learning on a few things. So I'm giving you an example. For instance, it's through the boutique in Geneva that I learned at some point that we had an issue on a deploy and buckle on the Blast collection that was, hurting the customer. It was at the beginning. And then we obviously elevated that at the product department, and we saw that, in fact, we could improve, and we improved. So that comes from retail. And because it's direct to the brand, it helped us to identify the issue much quicker.
No, that makes sense. And you always have to be looking out for that. Of course, the devil's advocate would say, well, you guys should be, wear testing it yourselves a lot. But, previous to being able to take your time, as you sort of alluded to with the corporate-owned mentality, sometimes that structure doesn't leave enough time for actual watchmaking. You've been in this long enough to know that the actual process of coming up with a movement, which takes a long time, but even a new model, you can't fit into these small windows. Sometimes a product is ready when it's ready, not according to some forecast or schedule. Talk a little bit about some of these basic contradictions between how watchmaking works and how the sort of corporate constant forecasting and updating mentality is designed to think.
I'm going to give you a very clear example, which is probably the one of the most important decisions that I had to take since the beginning of this year, which is about a product that we are supposed to be launched next year. And that product was initially designed, we started to think about it something like 2.5, 3 years ago. Because as you said, especially for the movement itself, the whole project on a watch is going to be, when you are a full-fledged manufacturer, is going to be at least, a 1.5 to 2 years to develop and to produce and manufacture and deliver it to the market. So having said that, the initial point of that watch was still when we were part of Kering, so probably 3 years ago or so, where we wanted to have a more commercial product on the marine line, something slightly sportier and so on. And so it was more tactical, I would say, than strategic, and definitely more short term. And we felt, okay, there is, a fit on the market. We could basically produce, X amount of that type of watches and generate revenue. But when I looked at the plan and basically early Feb and actually, Ariel, we had that discussion.
Oh yeah,
right. You remember that? So what I showed you, I decided to cancel it. And it obviously cost us. It cost us quite a few hundred of thousands of Swiss franc. It cost also within the company to say all those guys, that have been working on that product, and to say, guys, we're just gonna skip it, cancel it, because what was tactical is becoming strategic, and we have to do it rightly. And what I'm talking about, I'm not going to disclose more now. It's probably something now that will come in 2027. So basically, we are taking, a 2 years delay at least on something which I believe is absolutely fundamental for the brand equity. And therefore, that's probably the decision that I wouldn't have taken if we were belonging to a group, because we would have to deliver numbers, and it would have been difficult to justify, basically putting to the bin a few, 100 grand, and not having what is supposed to be a cool product anyway to launch. So they would have told me, come on, go ahead, sell those couple of thousands of watches, and it's not going to be anything wrong for the brand. Does it make sense? Maybe that type of things.
Yeah.
That are, yeah.
I mean, look, I'll be honest, and we have corporate brand sponsors on aBlogtoWatch, and even sometimes advertise on the Superlative Podcast, and I appreciate their business and what they do. With that said, I have not seen a lot of examples when a corporate-owned brand fundamentally does better, makes better watches, is more creative, does better marketing than an independently run one. It's often not about the actual corporate ownership. It has to do with the culture, the incentives, as you said, the time frames. Oftentimes at watch brands, The people who make the financial decisions are right there on a day-to-day basis. They understand the industry. They understand what's at stake. They make better decisions for the long term. Whereas in a corporate environment, you have these people making financial decisions that like aren't there on a day-to-day basis, don't really know what's going on, don't have a watch industry background at all. And there's all this arbitrary stuff that they have to make you do, like tell them how things are going or make promises that you can't keep and stuff like that. So I feel that there's a fundamental disconnect between what a contemporary mechanical watch, call enthusiast company, not always mechanical, does and how they operate, and the expectations of a company which is looking to own an investment. Watch brands take money to run. They don't make a lot, and any money you make either needs to go into marketing or research and development. There just isn't enough profits in the way most brands are run that you can take a significant part of it and funnel it off to a third-party disinterested investor who isn't actually working there, isn't making parts for you, or something like that. And maybe I'm wrong, but I just haven't seen too many instances of there being enough fat to give to someone else. Do you see what I mean?
Yes. No, absolutely. And I think there is also another component where, I was in Philadelphia beginning of the year to meet with Tim Mosso. So I did a video with him, and he was ready, to kick off the conversation and so on. And he said to me, "Do you mind, if I ask you those following questions?" I said, "No, absolutely not." But then I said to him, maybe you could just add one more question, which is why I like watches, and why do I have a true passion for watches? And actually he was really surprised because he did a few interviews videos, with also a few CEOs. And he said to me, it's very rare that I'm meeting, CEOs or managing director that really have a true passion for watchmaking. And it's true. I think if you ask quite a few CEOs, what do they buy and what do they collect in watches? And you ask them to remove the watches that are consigned to them by the brand they are working on, actually there will be very few. So I think it's also a point where if you, and probably which is more, in the indies, if at some point you meet Edouard from Mother, you meet Max from MBNF, or you meet the guys at Urwerk, I mean, they sweat watchmaking, right? It's in their blood, and and it's in mine. It's in mine because I absolutely love watchmaking. I collect myself, and therefore, when you do it with such an inner passion, I think at the end the outcome is different too, or at least on the way. Going back to what you were saying at the beginning on the management thing, it's probably also making the way you manage a company a bit different.
Well, I think there's two important parts there. One is it's very good to know that the person running Ulysse Nardin is what I call a product guy or product person. And that means you not only care about the products the company makes, you like the category in general. And the second thing is because you're interested in the products, you have a more wider scope of what the brand needs to do to succeed with consumers. You are a consumer yourself. You understand what the brand looks like from the outside. You know what you want to see from a similar brand, and that at least gives you some direction. Because I think the hardest thing, and I've been writing about this more and more, people don't appreciate this. If you are given the privilege of running a contemporary watch company, especially one that is not brand you started yourself, you're inheriting heritage, knowing what to do next is extremely difficult to come up with. Everybody's going to give you an idea, but actually knowing where to move product, actually knowing where to move branding and storytelling, it is somewhat random, I guess you could say. But of course, you want to have a strategy. Any professional does. It's a very difficult thing to decide, even if you love products. Sometimes it's even more difficult to do. But talk a little bit about how you make the decision about what to do with the brand and the products.
So obviously, when I took over the job, beginning of Feb, I was very much focused on Watches and Wonders, like beginning of April, where we also met, because it's such a big event that, my focus was very much short term. But I knew that post Watches and Wonders, April to December were going to be the most important months of my time at UN. and I'm taking into account the last 8 years and the next, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years plus, as long as I'm having fun and enjoy what I do. So, and why so is because there is, from a product point of view, there is quite a few products that have been developed 5, 6, 7 years ago. And therefore, we are entering the stage, and I'm talking about, 26, 27, 28, that are going to be very important in terms of product development. So I'm spending currently a lot of time on that. And actually, just before, and this is why I was a bit late for the podcast, sorry for that, I was at the manufacturer in La Chaux-de-Fonds, with the industrial director, with the head of product development, movement, and product, the habillage the case. And we were specifically talking about the future of the 118 caliber. In terms of finishing, in terms of proportion, in terms of height, in terms of weights, and talking about future product in mind. So product is absolutely, I'm spending a lot of time on that at the moment. 2, as much as I spend time on product, I'm spending time on the brand message. Making sure that, so I spend a lot of time in the museum, digging into our heritage to make sure that going forward, we create, I would say, a common message. Like there is, a red line, whatever we talk about the brand, whether it's about the heritage and, the marine decorator, or to the freak, or to something in between, they need to have that consistency. And I want to make sure also that we translate that brand message into the product going forward. So long story short, I'm spending currently a lot of time on the strategy, on the product, and on the marketing per se. And then after that, for me, it will be more a matter of execution. But I'm right in the middle of it, and that means taking, decision like the one I mentioned, earlier on the show, which is, canceling some of the product development that were due to be launched as of next year.
A ballsy decision, but great that you had the ability to even make that decision, right?
Yes, but that's a whole thing about, owning the company. If you own the part of the business, and it means that I have to make at some point those tough calls, because if I don't do it, we're not going to develop the brand the way they should be developed. And I'm not looking at the next 2 to 3 years. I'm looking, at some point I had a journalist at Watches and Wonders that came to see me and had met Rolf some time back. And she said to me, now that basically you are the helm of the company, what legacy do you want to leave, by the time you leave UN? And I said, first, I don't intend to leave UN. and two, I mean, no legacy. I mean, my role is to create an appetite for watchmaking for people that are not considering watchmaking today. That's, I believe, my role. And that's a joint role we have with our retail partners. And 2, I've said that in the company lately, and people even within the company, they think I'm crazy because obviously we are more niche and we have a low production. But I said to them that our ambition needs to be, at some point, I believe that we can be a first luxury watch. And obviously, even if you take brands that are selling, much more product than us on the luxury segment, like, the AP, maybe some of the Vacheron and so on, they are not a first luxury watch. But saying that, it showed the intention. And then when it's your intention, you might not succeed, but you're going to put things in place to be able to reach that goal. And long story short, I'm trying to leverage myself a lot of social media, myself to also interact with, collectors and also a younger crowd of collectors. And I've got an example of a consumer, 17 years old. Actually, I happened to meet with him the day in London he was purchasing his first marine torpiller with an enamel dial. Cool. 17, first luxury watch. Got to know me through social media. Never went into a multi-brand store before. And here we go, 17 years old, first UN watch and first luxury watch at all. So I think when you have that perspective, you basically adapt obviously, the means in order to reach that goal.
One of the things, of course, in appealing to kids is having a more aggressive price point, a lower price point. And my favorite period of Ulysse Nardin, I'll admit, is when the brand produced things at a very broad spectrum, starting at just a few $1,000s, going up to well over $1 million with special jewelry pieces and high complications. Few brands are really able to compete at that really big spectrum. I think it was always amazing that Ulysse Nardin could. Nowadays, I think it's obviously a little bit more consolidated. But what are your thoughts? Does the brand need to work within a narrower price delta, or is Ulysse Nardin the type of brand that has enough of a broad spectrum to sell entry-level watches as well as some of the exotic complications that, of course, people love from the brand?
So, in fact, I believe we could do, what was done before. I believe on one side doing, 5K marines and, a million plus complication is too much of a stretch. What I believe to be currently probably the sweet spot is, and then also it's a matter of positioning. So, and obviously you could disagree on that, but the fact that we've not been increasing massively the prices, over the past 10 years, I'm talking about with similar products, kind of deposition ourselves. So to me today, to have marine torpedoes and divers, at south of $10,000 is not right. Because it's going to position somehow us with IWDCs, even maybe brands like Zenith that, have a much entry price. But at the same time, when you see our capability in haute horlogerie, when you see what we are capable to do, to have something that is, for me, below 10 doesn't make any sense today. And I'm looking at what the competitors are doing, because it's you need to be consistent at some point, with kind of, look-alike brands in terms of positioning. So if you think about brands like, Breguet, Blancpain, today or above, they're going to be more in the region, of maybe, 12 to 15K, which I believe it's probably at some point the right entry price for the brand. Not today. But I think going forward, the entry for UN will be anywhere, 12 to 15. And then at the maximum, it always depends. It's from a mechanical point of view, it's relevant. It's okay to be, at $500,000 or above, but I'm not going to load that with diamonds, to make it $1 million.
What do you think a consumer should get for that entry-level price point, that 12 to 15,000? What do you think should be included in that? Are we talking, diamond sill, which I think should be in pretty much every one of your movements. That is the special coated silicone that's less brittle than standard silicone that is made. But what do you think people should be able to get at that price point?
I think they need to have a product which is versatile, meaning that ideally a product that, could be with you pretty much in any condition, whether it's, at the office during the day wearing a suit, that, a weekend with a t-shirt and a pair of jeans. I believe ideally that product needs to be therefore, 100 meter, a crown, which is crude, because at some point, if you want, to be in the pool or to be in the water, you have to, if you really want that watch to be a daily. And, I think obviously that product needs to be beautiful. So I think ideally the dial needs to stand out. It needs to be pretty well finished also in terms of cases and movement in the back. If you decide the back of the watch needs to be open, and obviously eventually at that price point it needs to be, but it's okay for us, a movement which has been manufactured in-house. And obviously, I mean, you've been at UN. We manufacture really the movement from A to Z, including the silicone component for the escapement. So I think all in all, if you've got that daily, quite versatile product, maybe slightly more on the sporty side that can be with you, pretty much every day, with a lot of technological and horological content, you have a banger of a watch.
Speaking of silicone and movements and things like that, you didn't actually comment when I mentioned the diamond sill. So I'm wondering, what is the future of that? Is it going to be remaining just in the special high-end watches? I think it's a great thing. Not that many other companies offer hardened silicon. Just thinking about some of those distinguishing factors, right? Just curious your thoughts on it, or maybe it's just too expensive to produce in mass.
No. And actually, and I'm happy that you are asking the question because it means that we've not been doing a good job in terms of communication. Diamond seal is on the escapement of the 118 caliber. So the basic caliber manufacturer that you have basically on the watches that start at 10K, such as the Marine and the divers, they do have the diamond seal technology. But for sure, it's something that, so two things. One, it's about communication, and we need to make sure that we communicate that more. And two, we are definitely, on the research and development part, the escapement is definitely an area where we do research. And silicone and diamond seal obviously are key components in those discussions.
The relationship with Ludwig Oechslin continues after many, many decades, and he's quite the character. When you ask him about what he'd like to do, obviously he's not the type of person to sit you down and be like, Matthieu, this is what I think you should do with the brand. But he's someone that always has ideas and things like that. What can you disclose about the types of projects that he's advocating for, or the types of ideas and ambitions that he has?
So very concretely, we are currently working with him on a new product, but it's a ground complication. What else can I say? It's more on the astronomy side,
of course,
of what you have been doing in the past. But it's a very highly complex movement. It's really, really high autology, and therefore it's probably something that you will see in 2028, I believe. So definitely working on a product, and then we are obviously doing a lot of things with him, whether it's events, whether it's getting together with clients. We do very few interviews, but we do also a bit. Is because there is always a new story that I will get to hear from him every time I meet with him, and so for me it's a matter of always learning something new about the UN heritage and UN past, but definitely also we are basically working on a new product together. So he stays very close to UN.
In terms of other inspiration, obviously looking to the past is one thing, but I think that what's always been exciting about Ulysse Nardin is looking forward. Is the Freak going to be your platform for experimentation? Will you be doing other things? Because I feel that you agree, not only should the brand be looking at this past, but there's a novelty that people expect from Ulysse Nardin, which means you have to be able to create new things. Where are you looking for inspiration? Is it going to be, the world of materials and boats, or is it going to be sort of something else? I'm just curious to know where your heart looks for inspiration, some of the interesting things that you'd like to add into the brand.
Yes, look, it's honestly, there is things that I know and there is things that I don't know yet. Because for me, it is really linked also to the essence of the brand message. And that's basically where I'm spending most of my time currently. It's to make sure that whatever we bring to the table, that is not gimmicky. That there is a true purpose of improving something that already exists, or bringing something new that could end up being a disruptive innovation that will really bring progress to the watchmaking, which I think for me is very much in the spirit of the Freak, for instance. So what I can tell you at the moment is we are testing a few things. So obviously we want to spread that innovative, daring spirit of UN that takes life in the escapement is definitely an area where we are researching. New materials, whether it's for the movement or also for the case. So for me, for instance, the fact that we've been able to create, a composite material made of carbonium that comes from the aircraft industry and fishing nets, I love it. Because for me, it's a way to bring something new, to show that we are pioneering new materials. And at the same time, it's a way for us to speak about our heritage, the sea, and our concern about the pollution of the water, basically, right? So for me, that's also a good way. We are also trying on the métier d'art to see what kind of new métier d'art we could create. I want to dig more into the marquetry of silicon marquetry. We've done one version with a blast, which is absolutely stunning.
Yeah, it was
Obviously,
really cool.
We know the marquetry
really
of
nice.
wood, we know the marquetry of straw, but I mean, marquetry of silicone, only UN could do it, right? So I also want to leverage more, what we've been experimenting in the past. It's not just about, coming always with something new, but at some point, if we feel we've got something relevant, I want also to be able to expand it a bit more throughout the product range.
What is or isn't the current synergy between Ulysse Nardin and Gerard Perregaux? I think people are curious about that. Explain what the brands share and what they don't.
We have a motto, which is the great, Chinese wall between the two brands. At least for marketing, communication, and first and foremost for the product development. So nothing to do in terms of teams, nothing to do in terms of similar processes, similar movement, nothing. Then for the rest, finance, HR, some of the tools, the industrial capability we have, this is basically we are joining our forces. But apart from that, it's very much separate. And we need to keep it this way.
No, I think it's an important question because people know that you're related, but actually knowing what that means can be fuzzy sometimes, for sure. One of the things that I think is so important to the brand, of course, is silicon. The Freak came out in around 2001. Obviously, it's such a crucial part of the brand. To this day, I think it seems to be where you put most of your focus. What is it about the Freak as a product person that you really love? Because it is an incredibly interesting area. It's weird. It's the Freak, but it's also very, very endearing. What does the Freak mean to you? And now that you've sort of taken over its development, where do you want it to go?
In fact, I think beyond the product, I like the spirit of the Freak, which is for me very UN. And I feel it's probably the product which is the most adapted to really voice the UN spirit. The spirit also of that management buyout, where basically for me it's more a continuity and it's something unusual, and the spirit basically of UN into the future. So let me explain. Ludwig told me the story where at some point he was in the room with Pierre Gygax and Rolf Schneider in the 90s, and they wanted to really shake up the watchmaking world. They wanted to bring progress, and they were okay to not please everyone, So I think that spirit of trying to do things different, that spirit of not walking in somebody else's footsteps, actually the spirit of the entrepreneurs. For me, all of that is condensed in the Freak, and therefore, for me, I see more and more people getting into UN and especially getting into Freak that shares the same spirit. So, long story short, and I'm not going to criticize them, but I'm just saying somebody that is going to be a banker all his life, trying to not taking so much risks, planning. Being much more rational than creative, I mean, that type of person that will be probably very assertive on the risk side, Freak is not for him. And actually, UN might not be for him. But on the opposite side, I mean, I'm seeing so much passionate people, even the young chap, 17 years old, I happen to learn that he's one of the most talented jazz player, saxophone in the UK. He's driven. He's got something strong in him that drives him and that makes him doesn't want to walk basically in footsteps that have been done, that have been already, walked by somebody else. So I think that's for me the freak. That's a freak spirit, and therefore I want to make sure that going forward, that we beyond the product, that I'm making sure that I build communities of collectors that share that same spirit. Does it make sense?
I just had this idea for ads. You have to have a picture of people like these bankers with a freak next to it, and then just say, this watch is not for you. So just have pictures of people that you don't want wearing the watch, and just literally have the watch next to it and just say, this watch is not for you.
Yes, I mean, in a way, yes. Obviously, in a way, yes. I believe that, UN and especially freak is polarizing by nature. But it's all right.
We're basically out of time, Matthieu. We have so much more to discuss, so I'll have to have you back on the show. I encourage everyone to visit the Ulysse Nardin website and to see the articles on aBlogtoWatch that we have written about some of the very cool stuff. I have more questions to ask, but we're out of time. Anything that you want to say to the audience about Ulysse Nardin before we sign off?
No, in fact, I'd like to thank you, Ariel. And I mean it because, I've met a bunch of people and, opinion leaders at Watches and Wonder. And this is why I wanted to do that podcast with you, because I believe that you belong to the few that are really authentic about their content. So honestly, keep up the good job, and happy to be back on the show at some point.
Very kind of you. This has been the Superlative Podcast interview with Matthieu Haverlan, Managing Director of Ulysse Nardin. Matthieu, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ariel.